And now I'd like to introduce the Secretary General of the African Development Bank, Professor Vincent Nemehile, who will preside over the opening ceremony. Please welcome him with a big round of applause.
Your Excellency Dong Yeon Kim, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Strategy and Finance of the Republic of Korea and Chair of the Board of Governors of the African Development Bank Group. The Right Honorable Edward Ngirite, Prime Minister of the Republic of Rwanda, representing the Chairperson of the African Union Assembly. His Excellency Mr. Sadidine Lotumani, Head of Government of the Kingdom of Morocco. His Excellency Mr. John Dramani Mahama, former President of the Republic of Ghana. His Excellency Dr. Ibrahim Asane Mayaki, Chief Executive Officer of NEPAD, representing the Chairperson of the African Union Commission. Dr. Jim Yong Kim, President of the World Bank Group. Dr. Vera Lom-Songwe, Executive Secretary of the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. Honorable Governors of the African Development Bank Group. Dr. Akinwumi Ayodele Adesina, President of the African Development Bank Group. Honorable Heads of Institutions of the Republic of Korea, Excellencies, Ambassadors, members of the Diplomatic Corps, dear Executive Directors of the African Development Bank Group, distinguished guests, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I have the singular honor and privilege to welcome you to the 53rd and 44th sessions of the annual meetings of the Boards of Governors of the African Development Bank and the African Development Fund, respectively. On this very solemn occasion, I would like to express our gratitude to you all for kindly and favorably responding to our invitation. I will have the privilege to moderate the opening program, and we hope that it will be a very short program. I will take you through the program and invite the various persons to speak who have a speech to make, particularly the keynote address from the President of the African Development Bank Group, the Deputy Prime Minister of Korea, and a number of others. Before we begin, we'd like to produce a video greeting from the President of Korea.
Unlimited potential, dynamic power, and a strong partnership that brings synergy. The 2018 Annual Meetings of the African Development Bank. Africa, a continent of great potential, has rich natural and human resources essential for Africa's industrialization. The land of opportunities is put under the spotlight as a newly emerging market. And the African Development Bank has always been on the journey towards the continent's explosive growth. Established in 1964, the African Development Bank has pushed forward diverse development and assistance projects that reflect its 5 initiatives. With such efforts, the institution has been committed to promoting a stable economic and social development of the region. Korea is a country that has successfully risen from the ashes of war in just half a century. A country of strength that has transformed itself from a recipient country to one of the advanced economies in the world. A country equipped with advanced technologies and professional workforce to lead the era of the Fourth Industrial Revolution. Korea is now ready to prove its strength again, being part of the advancement of Africa. So far, it has shared its development experience with Africa and continuously supported the region with various resources such as technology, human resources, and finance. Korea-Africa economic cooperation is one effort that demonstrates Korea's pursuit of consistent cooperation with Africa. And the country will continue its efforts to share know-how and future vision for helping the continent address daunting challenges it faces. A new chapter of cooperation between Korea and Africa will begin from the African Development Bank 2018 annual meetings.
Dr. Edward Unguretin, the Honorable Prime Minister of Rwanda, Dr. Saad Din Al-Othmani, the Honorable Prime Minister of Morocco, Dr. Akinwumi Adesina, President of the African Development Bank, Dr. Jin Yong Kim, President of the World Bank Group, delegations from member countries, and distinguished guests. I'm very pleased to welcome and congratulate you on the opening of the 2018 annual meetings of the African Development Bank in Busan, my hometown. The ADB has played a leading role in the eradication of poverty and in economic and social development in Africa. Notably, President Adesina's initiative, the High Fives for Transforming Africa, is shedding a bright light on the future of Africa. Africa is no longer a sleeping lion. It's now emerging as a new growth engine with boundless development potential for the global economy. The World Bank foresees that Africa will record the fastest economic growth in the world by 2050. I completely agree with that prospect. I'm therefore very pleased that the theme Accelerating Africa's Industrialization is discussed here in Korea. Korea is happy to share with African countries its experiences in simultaneously achieving industrialization and democratization in just half a century. The Korean government is pursuing a people-centered economy. It's about ensuring that the people equally enjoy benefits from economic growth. Likewise, cooperation between two sides has to bring tangible benefits to their people. Korea will endeavor to ensure that its economic cooperation with Africa is mutually beneficial. We intend to expand our official development assistance and continue to share with African nations our experience and know-how gained through economic development and industrialization. I hope that Korea and Africa will be able to jointly respond to rapid changes in the global economy and make progress toward the future through cooperation in various areas, including the Fourth Industrial Revolution. With these meetings, we will be able to understand each other better and become closer, going beyond economic cooperation. I hope that you will enjoy Korea's beautiful scenery and advanced technology as well as its culture, including food and K-pop. Thank you very much.
Excellencies, may I now invite His Excellency, Mr. Dong-Yong Kim, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Strategy and Finance of the Republic of Korea, and Chair of the Boards of Governors of the African Development Bank Group, to make his statement.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, on behalf of the Korean government and the Korean people, I would like to welcome all of you to the 2018 annual meetings of the African Development Bank and this wonderful event. Most of you traveled from the other side of the globe to be here, and perhaps some of you had to walk on the plane. Like you, I usually have to walk during my flight abroad. In my most recent travel with a long flight, however, I took some time to read a book that left a deep impression on me. This book, written 170 years ago, is widely known around the world, and has been translated into many languages. I would like to share with you a passage from this novel that predicts Africa's prosperity in the future. The original text is in Old English, but I will be reading it in the modern form. If ever Africa shall show an elevated and cultivated race, and commit must sometime her turn to figure in the great drama of human improvement. Life will awake there with a gorgeousness and splendor. As God chastens whom she loves to make Africa the highest and noblest in that kingdom which he will set up when every other kingdom has been tried and failed. For the first shall be last, and the last first. Can you guess what book this is? It is world-renowned novel, Uncle Tom's Cabin, written by Harriet Stowe. When Africa was going through a difficult time around 200 years ago, the author envisioned a promising future of Africa. Yes, Harriet Stowe was right. Very surprisingly, we now witness strong evidence of Africa flourishing, just as she predicted. Early this decade, the Time magazine and The Economist used the same expression, Africa Rising, as a title to describe Africa's dynamic development in the 2000s. Growth in the region of the past 20 years was 3 percentage points higher than the previous period. And the absolute poverty ratio decreased to 2/3 of what it was 2 decades ago. Despite this impressive achievement, however, Africa's full potential has not been reached yet. Industry's contribution to GDP is still lower than in other parts of the world, and natural resources make up 70% of Africa's export. To translate Africa's huge potential into actual economic prosperity, industrialization is critical. Considering this importance, it is very timely for the African Development Bank to select industrialization as one of the President Adesina's High Five initiatives, and also as the theme of this year's annual meetings. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to address 3 points on Africa's industrialization. 2 of these points are my suggestions on its future direction, and the last one is on one of the most promising areas of cooperation between Korea and Africa. First, the need for an innovative approach. Industrialization policy should take into account the unique conditions of each country. While much can be learned from other countries, these cannot be applied uniformly in another country without considering its economic and social context and external circumstances. In the face of the fourth industrial revolution, a new approach has been more important than ever. New technologies can provide leapfrogging opportunities by speeding up the industrialization process and creating new value. Africa is well positioned to capitalize on these technologies on the back of its favorable structural factors. More than half of its population is under the age of 19. With better education and training, this young generation can drive Africa's economic transformation. In this context, it is encouraging to see that Africa's digital consumer base is growing rapidly, and the number of smartphone users will exceed 700 million by year 2020. I hope that these factors will lead African countries to achieve miracles of desert comparable to miracle on the Han River that Korea has achieved during its development era. Second, importance of inclusive growth. It is widely known that 6 out of 10 countries with the highest growth rate are in Africa. However, we also need to note that 7 out of 20 countries with the most unequal income distribution are also located in Africa. Persistent inequality is a global phenomenon, not limited to Africa alone. It calls for our special attention because it undermines both sustainability and potential for growth. This is why the Korean government, since the launch of the new administration last year, has begun to shift its economic policy paradigm to focus more on the people. To this end, Korea made it a policy priority to develop human capital, reinforce social safety net, and enhance social mobility. With the fourth industrial revolution, especially, the difference in accessibility to ICT and other technologies can widen the economic disparity among classes. It is therefore important to enhance inclusiveness by making sure that everyone in the region can utilize advanced technologies. Kenya's M-Pesa is a telling example of financial inclusion. With its mobile money transfer service, many Africans in remote areas now have access to banking services. In this sense, it was a move in the rapid direction for the African Union to adopt people-driven development as one of the 7 objectives in its Agenda 2063 to support women, children, and youth. Third, smart infrastructure through Korea-African partnership. Let me now talk about a promising area where Korea can contribute to the development of African countries, which is smart infrastructure. Smart infrastructure can provide a new solution to Africa's shortage in roads, airports, and harbors. It allows optimal use of resources and can even replace traditional infrastructure. Africa is already producing substantial outcomes in this area. The world's first drone port will be built in Rwanda to deliver basic necessities to people in need. In Tanzania, 200,000 farmers who adopted smart farm technology saw a 30% increase in their rice production. Korea has joined the efforts of Africa since 2006 in building smart infrastructure through development financing and knowledge sharing. For instance, Korea financed a railroad electronic interlocking system in Egypt and support Kenya's intelligent public transportation system through the knowledge sharing program. Going forward, Korea is strongly committed to share its rich expertise and experience as Africa's close partner. And I hope that various programs during this week will facilitate smart infrastructure cooperation between Korea and Africa. Distinguished guests and ladies and gentlemen, the relationship between Korea and Africa goes back a long way. The map on the scene was drawn by Korea 600 years ago. It's called Gangnido. It's astonishing and almost hard to believe that Korea included the African continent in the world map about 100 years before the European did. Although it's not in perfect scale, you can see that it includes Africa, Europe, and India. It even marks specific places such as the Nile, the Sahara, and Anfa. Anfa, as you may know, is the original name for Casablanca in Morocco. I would like to now shift our attention to Busan, the host city of this year's event, particularly because this city has had a special relationship with Africa. In 1951, during the Korean War, the imperial troops from Ethiopia, called the Gangnew Battalion, arrived here in Busan to join the United Nations forces to help us. At that time, South Korea had retreated all the way back to Busan, where many refugees were suffering from extreme poverty. Our African allies, including Ethiopia and South Africa, helped set the stage for Korea's development out of ashes of the Korean War. I am very proudly say that Busan has now developed into Korea's second largest city with one of the world's busiest ports. The city's slogan, Dynamic Busan, embodies this active development and enterprising spirit, which are in line with Africa's aspiration for growth. I am sure that valuable insight shared during the meetings will help us take a step close to this goal. Honorable Edouard Ngirente, Prime Minister of Rwanda, Honorable Saad Din N. Othmani, Prime Minister of Morocco, President Dr. Akinwumi Adesina of the African Development Bank, President Jim Yong Kim of the World Bank, fellow governors, representatives from international organizations, and distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you again for coming all the way to Korea for this year's annual meeting. I would also like to thank the African Development Bank and Busan City for organizing these wonderful events for us. And while you must have a busy schedule during this meeting, I hope you will take some time to experience Busan and Korea's hospitality. One of my personal recommendations to visit is Haeundae Beach, which is not only one of the most beautiful tourist spots in the country, but also where you can feel the energetic spirit of the youth. It's just in walking distance from your accommodation. Once again, thank you again, and welcome to Korea. And I hope this year's meetings are fruitful and enjoyable. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Deputy Prime Minister. The Prime Minister talked about the importance of Busan with regard to the hosting of these annual meetings. And of course, the President of the African Development Bank has a joke about Busan and the annual meetings, and he thinks that because we've come here regularly to organize the meetings, some of us should be honorable citizens of Busan. In that light, I would like to recognize for special thanks Mr. Jaemin Park, the Vice Mayor of Busan for Administrative Affairs, who is here seated. Can you please give him a hand of applause? Excellencies, before the President of the African Development Bank makes his keynote speech, which will be the next, may I crave your indulgence to have a video number 2 on the AFDB theme.
Africa, a continent of tremendous opportunities. From Kenya to Nigeria, Morocco to Namibia, South Africa to Egypt. Industrialization lies at the heart of the African Development Bank's priorities. But there are also challenges: climate change, youth and women employment, fragility, socioeconomic inequality, all call for collaborative solutions. The bank, its partners and donors are investing together to make a difference in the daily lives of Africans. A new ultra-modern cement factory in the Democratic Republic of Congo is one of the largest in Africa. This new container port in Namibia is critical to Southern Africa's industrial expansion.
The new port will definitely be an asset for us to store and keep a lot of cargo in our port.
The bank and its partners have helped transform this gateway into a major regional hub.
I am aiming at 50 containers per hour. I love my job. I love it very much. How are you this morning, my brother?
Increased inter-African trade needs more efficient port operations and better road networks.
Kwa hakika tulikuwa tuende kazi ilikuwa ngumu kwa sababu ya barabara vile ilikuwa. Mimi nimeshawahi lala.
This section of the Cape to Cairo highway was funded by the bank to drastically reduce travel time between Nairobi and Addis Ababa. To address food insecurity, the bank and its partners funded this fertilizer plant in Nigeria, a major game changer for the country's agricultural and socio-economic landscape.
Cikin goman nan, dan albarkacin wannan noma da nake, ana nake samu abin da muna taruwa ni da su tunda sun kawo ƙarfin da za su taimaka mani.
This plant is creating jobs, boosting stability and food security.
Amma in ina samu, to zan jawo yarana har ma in jawo wani, in kamo hannun wani nima yanda za a ke kokara daga niman daga shi. Don mu samu ci gaba gaba da.
Industrialization cannot take place without electricity. This is why the bank has made investment in energy a priority. Over the last 20 years, Morocco has led a massive effort to provide power access for all.
أنا خدامة في الروض والروض أسسته جمعية الأمل وعزيزة عليا الخدمة ديالتي بزاف.
With the bank's support, Over 40,000 isolated villages have been connected to the grid.
نقول الضو ما يمكنش تخيل حياتي بلا بيه من هنا لقدام.
These are just a few snapshots of how the African Development Bank, with the support of its partners and donors, is meeting the challenges and the opportunities for a more industrialized Africa.
Nos papas, nos grands-pères, ils pensaient que l'avenir était en dehors de l'Afrique, mais nous pensons que l'avenir c'est en Afrique.
Indeed, Africa's time is now.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, may I invite Dr. Akinwumi Adesina, President of the African Development Bank, to deliver his keynote speech.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary General. Let me offer first and foremost a special thanks to His Excellency the President of Korea, President Moon Jae-in, for his excellent support and for that heartwarming and very encouraging video address that he gave us. Your Excellency, the Deputy Prime Minister of Korea and the Minister of Strategy and Finance, and also the Chairman of the Board of Governors of the bank, my dear friend Dr. John Dong-jeon Kim, the Deputy Mayor of Busan, Mr. Jamin Park, the Prime Minister of Rwanda, Edward Ingerente, Prime Minister of Morocco, His Excellency Salihin Othmani. Let me also thank you in particular, the Prime Minister Ingerente, for representing His Excellency President Paul Kagame, President of Rwanda, and Chairperson of the African Union. Your Excellency, President John Mahama, former President of Ghana, the former President of the African Development Bank that are here, former President Dr. Fodor, and former President Kabaj, please thank them for coming, and we appreciate the leadership and all the great work you've done. President Jim Kim of the World Bank, Dr. Mayaki, representing the Chairperson of the African Union Commission, the Executive Secretary of the Economic Commission for Africa, my dear sister Vera Songwe, the President of the Afri-Exim Bank, Dr. Rama, honorable ministers, ambassadors, governors of the African Development Bank, the executive directors of the African Development Bank, business leaders, civil society representatives, leaders, media partners, senior management and staff of the bank, dynamic youth, young leaders all across Africa, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, and of course, I'm really excited that my greatest source of inspiration, my dear wife, Grace, is here with us today. Welcome, honey, for the meetings. Good morning. Join Achim. Bonjour. Bon dia. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to the 2018 annual meetings of the African Development Bank Group. I am delighted to be in Korea in the smart city of Busan. So smart that part of the new blockbuster movie, Rocking the World, called The Black Panther, was shot right here. So I can proudly do this. I would like to thank the government of Korea for hosting us for these annual meetings. Many thanks to all the members of the Korean Planning Committee for the annual meetings and our own bank staff for their excellent efforts. I wish to in particular thank you, the governors of the bank, who represent the shareholders, for being here in such large numbers. This is such a huge encouragement for us. Your presence and support puts the wind behind our sails. I am also delighted to welcome my very dear friend and brother, Dr. Jim Kim, the president of the World Bank, who grew up actually in Korea, to our annual meetings. I greatly value your presence and your personal sacrifice to be here. In fact, if I recall, this is the first time that the president of the World Bank will be attending the annual meetings of the African Development Bank. And so this is historic. So thank you, Jim. The World Bank is a great partner for the African Development Bank, and together we can do more for Africa. And by the way, a hearty congratulations to you on your general capital increase. We're very proud of all the great work you all did. And so, Jim, if you may just stand and get a special recognition for being here today. And what better place to discuss doing more for Africa than right here in Korea, a country that has achieved remarkable economic development and that stands as an example to the rest of the world. 60 years ago, Korea was a poor nation. Today, it is the 11th largest economy in the world. The miracle of the Han River did not happen by chance. It happened through industrialization, pure and simple. In the 1970s, Korea built heavy industries, investing massively in infrastructure, including rail and ports. By the 1980s, through deliberate policies, it shifted to light industries. And by early 1990s, it moved into high-valued added industry. Today, Samsung, LG television, and phones dominate globally, while Korean cars are everywhere. Korea was deliberate and consistent in its industrial drive, just like others, such as China and Japan. Africa must learn from Korea's industrialization and the equally remarkable experiences in China, Japan, and of course, other parts of the world. But why do I say this? I say it because Africa is actually deindustrializing. Between 2012 and 2018, Africa's industrial value added declined from $702 billion to $630 billion, a loss of $72 billion. Among countries with the largest industrial output, industrial value added dropped sharply by 41% in Nigeria, 26% in South Africa, 64% in Egypt, and 67% in Algeria. But some are doing well. Morocco's industrial output expanded in the period by 16% as it became the hub for global aeronautical companies. Ethiopia witnessed a five-fold increase in its industrial value added despite its heavy investments, which is driven by its heavy investments in industrial parks, special economic zones, strategic partnerships with Chinese companies for its leather industry, and with global textile and garment companies. The deceleration of industrial output in Africa is possibly at the heart of the massive youth unemployment we witness today. That is why 11 billion young people enter the labor market every year, and only 3 million of them get jobs. To create more jobs, I mean quality, well-paying jobs, Africa must fast-track industrialization. That is why the African Development Bank plans to invest $35 billion over the next 10 years towards its focus on industrialization. The bank's industrialization strategy hopes to help Africa to raise its industrial GDP from the little over $700 billion today to over $1.72 trillion by 2030. This will allow Africa's GDP to rise to over $5.6 trillion while moving the GDP per capita to over $3,350. Africa is truly blessed. From the vast and yet untapped agricultural lands, we currently account for 65% of all the arable land left to feed 9 billion people in the world by 2050, to the rich deposits of natural gas, oil, minerals, metals. The continent is brimming with natural resource potential. And of course, nobody eats potential. The irony is that Africa is simply exporting mainly raw and unprocessed commodities. Little wonder its economies are often subject to global commodity price volatilities. African farmers work hard every year to deliver 75% of the global cocoa production, but Africa reaps less than 5% of the profits from the $120 billion that comes from the chocolate market. Africa accounts for 50% of the world's gold production, but only receives 4% of the $300 billion revenues in global gold earnings. The formula for the wealth of nations is very clear. Rich nations add value to all they produce. Poor nations simply export raw materials. Africa needs to industrialize and add value to everything that it produces, from agriculture to minerals to oil to metals, everything. We have to make sure Africa moves away from the bottom to the top of the global value chains. To drive this industrialization process, Africa must quickly build a globally competitive, well-educated, highly skilled workforce for the future. And that future is already here. We cannot afford to waste any more time. As the fourth industrial revolution has already started, the nature of jobs is changing very rapidly. Africa must prepare its young people for the jobs of the future, not the jobs of the past. Africa must accelerate higher education, vocational and technical training in building the skills of the future. In particular, greater emphasis should be placed on digitalization, mathematics, material sciences, biotechnology, engineering, artificial intelligence, robotics, and quantum computing. These areas will dominate the industrial revolution in the near future, and Africa must not be left behind. The African Development Bank has a demonstrable record of commitment to skills development and supporting innovation. This includes the establishment of centers of excellence in several African universities, including Nigeria, Kenya, and Rwanda. Investments of more than $200 million in technology parks in Ethiopia, Cape Verde, and Senegal. Africa, as we have heard from the Deputy Prime Minister, must take advantage of the digital economy. The continent is leading the world today in mobile online payments, and the continent's digital revolution is set to continue. By 2021, it is expected that the continent will have over 1 billion smartphones in regular use. With greater investments in digital infrastructure, Africa can make quantum leap on digital industrial development. And that is why the African Development Bank has been investing heavily in the construction of digital backbones across the continent, including the Central Africa backbone to link Cameroon, Congo, and Central Africa, and the Trans-Saharan fiber optic backbone to connect Chad and Niger. ICT infrastructure and connectivity will open up the landlocked countries to the digital world. To help Africa and its industrialization drive, the African Development Bank will focus on a few areas. First, the bank will help to drive agricultural industrialization, with focus on supporting countries to develop staple crop processing zones, which will help agribusinesses and agro-allied industries to locate in rural areas, supported with integrated infrastructure, including roads, power, water, ICT. The staple crop processing zones will help to create new zones of economic prosperity in the rural areas of Africa. Second, the bank will invest in new skills needed for industrialization. Skills enhancement zones will help young graduates connect to industries where they will be exposed to a broad range of skills needed by industries. We will support the establishment of technology parks, business incubation, and acceleration programs to connect small, young, and medium business-sized businesses to industrial growth poles. Third, the bank will continue to support the private sector in critical industries through private equity investments, including small and medium-sized enterprises. Fourth, the bank will continue to support the development of the capital markets to deepen access to finance for businesses to grow and to thrive on the continent. And finally, the bank will support the partners, with its partners, the North-South cooperation and South-South cooperation in industrial development, especially for special economic zones, so Africa can learn from the best lessons that worked and avoid the mistakes of others. One of the downsides of industrial approach of developed countries has been the reliance on polluting technologies that may be good for growth, but bad for development, and bad for health. Industrialization should be done with careful attention to energy pathways that are less polluting. Africa needs to promote green growth. At the African Development Bank, we are extremely conscious of our climate and environmental responsibilities and leadership role. Consequently, we are tripling our climate finance to 40% of our portfolio by 2020. The African Development Bank is leading today on renewable energy. When I was elected president just 3 years ago, the share of our portfolio that was in renewable energy was 14%. We've moved that 2 years ago to 74%, and last year we achieved 100% of our new lending in renewable energy. However, we recognize that for many African countries, the need to diversify their energy mix is critical to support industrial development just like the rest of the world. But ladies and gentlemen, industrialization should not always just be about the large companies. We must focus also on small and medium-sized enterprises, especially those run by the youth. This is for good reason. The youth are the present and the future of Africa. I see the spirit of success in the dynamism of the youth across Africa. And there are so many of them right here in these annual meetings. If you are in the house and the youth or you are young at heart, can you just wave so that we can see that you're here? Great. And the young at heart also. Think about the case of a young Rwandese lady, Clarisse Iribagiza, who trained at the Kigali Institute of Science and Technology under a globally respected master's in information and communications technology supported by the African Development Bank. Armed with her degree, she had a dream to become a major player in the ICT industry. One day, she saw the president of Rwanda, Paul Kagame, jogging in the city and quickly moved to close to him on the tracks. What a bold woman to do that. And just to tell him about her business ideas. She got pushed aside by the security guards. She persisted. She moved in closer. She said, Mr. President, you sent me to the Kigali Institute of Science and Technology, but I have a business idea to talk to you about. The president, obviously probably tired from the exertions of working, asked her to move closer. The president made a modest contribution. The young lady launched her ICT business. And just think about it. She recently sold that business for $10 million US. And what a great return on investment for the president and of course for the African Development Bank. Well, perhaps if more presidents will be jogging, they will find so many entrepreneurs like Clarisse. And Africa's industrial development will be moving faster if we can get a boost down like that. Clarisse is now a member of the Presidential Advisory Council on getting young people, young African entrepreneurs supported by the bank. Well, Clarisse is in this hall today. Clarisse, where are you? Please come right up. I present to you with a great pleasure, Clarisse. To industrialize, can imagine how young she is and see how Africa will look like in the future. To industrialize, Africa must mobilize greater domestic resources and direct them to close Africa's infrastructure gap and financing needs for critical industries. And just as in the case of Clarisse, in whom someone not only saw potential, but invested in it, let's not only see Africa's potential, let's unlock it through investment. That is why the African Development Bank has created with its partners a transactional platform to leverage global pension funds and sovereign wealth funds and other institutional investors to significantly invest in Africa. That platform is called the Africa Investment Forum, a new investment marketplace for Africa that will set sail 7 to 9 November 2018 from Johannesburg, South Africa. And I would like to thank the World Bank, the IFC, the Inter-American Development Bank, the EBRD, the European Investment Bank, the Islamic Development Bank, and MIGA for joining us on this platform. And it's the first time we are doing that together. Please thank our partners for that. As the bank drives for Africa's faster industrialization, it will continue to accelerate delivery on its top priorities, the high fives, including Light Up and Power Africa, Feed Africa, Integrate Africa, and improve the quality of life of the people of Africa. The African Development Bank is doing all it can to support Africa's brighter future through all these areas, but we need more gas in the car to travel the full distance for Africa's economic development. Dear governors, you can be proud of your bank. Last year, with the strong support of our executive directors, the bank achieved the highest disbursement in its history since 1964 with $7.4 billion. The bank's net operating income, which had declined in 2014, has been turned around and increased by 63% compared to 2016, reaching record high levels. Our delivery of development impacts on the ground is quite impressive. Last year, the African Development Bank, again with the very strong support of our executive directors and our staff, was able to achieve the following. 4.4 million people benefited from electricity connections. 8.5 million people benefited from improvements in agriculture. 14 million people benefited from improved access to transport. 8.3 million people benefited from access to improved water and sanitation. And we provided access to 210,000 businesses that were linked to our investing companies with access to finance. With more resources, we can do more. In the next 3 years, the African Development Bank, with additional resources, plans to achieve the following: 31.5 million people with access to electricity, 45.8 million people benefiting from improved infrastructure, agriculture, 50.3 million people with improved access to transport, 36.8 million people with improved access to water and sanitation. That is why the bank is requesting from you, our shareholders, a general capital increase. A stronger bank, a better capitalized bank, combined with stronger support by you, our shareholders, our governors, our executive directors, and our eager staff, will deliver on the Africa we want. As Black Panther, T'Challa, the king of Wakanda, stood up and said to his challengers, "I accept your challenge." The African Development Bank, your bank, accepts the challenge to accelerate Africa's development. This is not my cause. This is not even African Development Bank's cause. This is our collective cause. It is about Africa's dreams, its hope, and its aspiration. With your support, we will accomplish the mission to industrialize Africa, to light up and power Africa, to feed Africa, to integrate Africa, and improve the quality of life of the people of Africa, our high fives. I wish you an exciting week at these annual meetings. Thank you very much. Kamsha Hamnida.
The African Development Bank forever. Thank you, Mr. President. May I invite the Right Honorable Dr. Edouard Ngirente, Prime Minister of the Republic of Rwanda, representing the Chairperson of the African Union and President of Rwanda, His Excellency President Paul Kagame, for his address.
Good morning. Mr. Dong Yeon Kim, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Strategy and Finance of Republic of Korea and Chairperson of the Board of Governors. Dr. Adesina, the President of African Development Bank. Dr. Jim Yong Kim, President of World Bank Group. Members of Board of Governors, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning to you all. I'm pleased to have this opportunity to address you on behalf of His Excellency Paul Kagame, President of Republic of Rwanda and Chairperson of African Union. I thank the African Development Bank for efficiently organizing this meeting and the government of the Republic of Korea for the warm hospitality we have enjoyed in this beautiful city of Busan. This year's theme is Accelerating Africa's Industrialization. This is a good occasion to reflect on the role of industrialization as a catalyst for economic development. Accelerating industrialization in Africa would increase productivity through value addition, create more jobs, raise incomes, and bring prosperity to our citizens. Globally, the share of Africa in the value chains of manufacturing is only around 2%, and most of our exports are raw commodities. Changing these trends requires political commitment, effective public services, a conducive regulatory environment, and a proactive private sector. As we know, Africa has gained momentum over the past decade on improving major macroeconomic indicators. Nevertheless, Africa faces constraints that must be addressed together with our partners, including production capacity, infrastructure, trade information, access to finance, and trade facilitation. The African Union Agenda 2063 indicates key flagship projects that we believe will accelerate transformational change on the continent. These projects include the African Commodity Strategy, the free movement of people, the Continental Free Trade Area, and the single African air transport market. The last three were finalized this year, and the implementation is already underway. The African Continental Free Trade Area, adopted by 44 African Union member states, which means 80% of AU membership in Kigali in March, is perhaps the most consequential. For the first time, Africa will constitute a single market for goods and services, which will also pave the way for free movement of people and investment. The ratification process for the Continental Free Trade Area is underway, and I wish to announce that countries like Ghana and Kenya have already deposited instrument of ratification. Rwanda will do it very soon, since the ratification has already been concluded by both Cabinet and Parliament. I would like to use this opportunity to call on all AU member states to speed up the ratification process. The African Continental Free Trade Area will create a wider market for more than 1.2 billion people with a combined GDP of $2.19 trillion US dollars. This will attract more productive investment and development of regional value chains. The African Union has also agreed to adopt economy format African passport and to progressively eliminate barriers to the free movement of Africans within our continent. Since 2014, Rwanda has offered visa on arrival to all African citizens, and the result in terms of travel and tourism have been very positive. At the beginning of this year, Rwanda extended visa on arrival to all citizens of any country in the world. The single African air transport market was launched in January this year. This will make transport of people and goods across the continent cheaper and faster. Holding our annual meeting in Busan is an opportunity to reinforce the good cooperation between Africa and the Republic of Korea. The establishment of the Korea-Africa Development Cooperation Framework in 2006 was successful at enhancing that relationship, particularly in the area of energy, ICT, agriculture, green growth, and human resource development. In Rwanda, our partnership with Korea has focused on higher education and knowledge transfer, building ICT innovation capacity, as well as key support to our technical and vocational training institution. The strong relationship that we have forged with leading Korean institutions have made a lasting impact, and we look forward to deepening our joint efforts going forward. I therefore want to reiterate that Korea has been a strong and reliable partner for Africa. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, the matters before you are of the greatest importance for Africa's future. I would like to conclude by extending President Kagame's congratulations to the African Development Bank and the Republic of Korea for the successful organization of this year's annual meetings, as well as his best wishes for fruitful and productive deliberation in the day ahead. Thank you for your kind attention.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, that brings to a close the opening ceremony. But permit me to make the following announcements. Immediately after this opening ceremony, there will be the high-level panel that will be meeting in this place, while the distinguished excellencies on the podium will go to the VIP room to hold on while the space is being prepared. Could you please all remain in the hall? Secondly, I need to remind you of the high-level luncheon by invitation later this afternoon during lunch. You may have received your invitations already. And also this evening, there will be a state dinner hosted by the Republic of Korea, which you will also have received an invitation. And finally, to remind you about the special event on Friday, the Africa Day celebration, being organized in conjunction with the African diplomats in Korea, which will be holding in this same room between 3 to 6 p.m. on Friday. We hope you'll be available to participate in the Africa program, Africa Day celebration. Excellencies, distinguished participants, honorable governors, thank you for your attention at the opening ceremony. Thank you.